A holy one comes down and says, hack that tree down, but leave the stump, let it slum it with the worms and shit. I'm paraphrasing here. Lactantius believed that the Antipodes nuts. Hello lovely people, my name is Emma, welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new. Does the Bible teach that the earth is flat? No. I mean barely. A literalist interpretation of the firmament is your best argument, and we're going to talk about why that's silly in this video. But first, last week I performed for you a miracle, and I asked you to guess in the comments as to how it was done. Many of you got the correct answer. Some of you had some ideas that were very close, but just missed the mark, so I'd like to highlight, these two comments were next to each other, so it seemed perfect to highlight Alice Ann Redacted and Dada Blue as the two closest answers. We all knew Emma as the Messiah, but now we have proof, praise be, and you're actually Jesus. That is correct. I am Jesus Christ incarnate. That is how I was able to turn water into wine. Moving on then, today we are going to be talking about the biblical flat earth. This is the idea that some people have, some people in the skeptic community as well. When I mentioned this last week, I saw a couple of people that were like, oh, actually the Bible does say that. Essentially what skeptics and biblical literalists, extreme literalists, are doing is making the same mistake, which is reading the Bible so literally that there is no room for metaphor, poetry, historical context, and that's not a good way to read the Bible for anyone. Skeptic, Christian, Jew, that's the wrong way to read the Bible. I know the right way to read the Bible. My understanding of how to read the Bible is based on biblical scholars and reading their opinions and reading their advice, talking to them. This is not me claiming some absolute authority despite being Jesus Christ incarnate. Immediately alienate a bunch of the viewers that I would like to see this video. I'm just messing around. I hope you're not offended by that. So does the Bible teach the earth is flat? I say no, at least very barely. Has the wider church, or the Catholic Church specifically, ever denied that the earth is a globe? Also no. So why in the heck do some modern flat earth believers use the Bible as part of their evidence for the earth being flat? Well, I shall tell you. I find biblical literalism in general so strange, so clinical, because it is a collection of spiritual texts. To read it so literally is to remove all the poetry, all the artistry, all the metaphor, and even taking popular turns of phrase, which we will talk about in this video, and just hammering it all and beaten into this word-by-word literal account. And in doing that, you lose the artistry, but also all of the context. Basically, it's silly, and so am I, so who better to tackle this issue, really? This video is going to be divided into two main sections. Your first section, section number one, probably the longer section, we're going to go through the parts of the Bible that people use to argue that the Bible says that the earth is flat. Section two, we're going to look at this prevalent myth and the origins of this myth that the wider church and medieval people in general believed that the earth was flat. Because, spoiler alert, that is not true. We're going to have fun, we're going to learn a lot. I did a lot of research for this video, so hopefully you really enjoy it. I got my Bible, I got my notes, I'm ready to go. It's going to be good. Before we kick off, I am very pleased to tell you that today's video is sponsored by Port 87. What the heck is that? I'll tell you, just calm down. As someone with a business email that is available to the public, one of the banes of my life and my existence is spam. That's why I'm genuinely very excited about Port 87. Port 87 is an emailing service designed to help you tackle spam, phishing, all of these horrendous email problems that we have. So Port 87 essentially gives you multiple email addresses. Port 87 automatically organizes your inbox into labels based on the address it's sent to. For example, if my Port 87 address is Emma Stinky, then I will give my friends the email address Emma Stinky Friends. That means this category will only accept emails from my friends who have this address. Port 87 allows you to block an email address, so if the spam keeps coming after you click unsubscribe, you can block it. Unlike your regular email, Port 87 doesn't have a general inbox. You have this aggregated inbox, which just shows the labels that you want to see. There's nothing sitting in your inbox waiting to be sorted, as in a regular email. It's all automatically sorted as it comes in. Here you can see that I've sent myself an email to one of my labels. As this is the first email from this account, the original account receives a verification check, that means the sender has to prove that they're human before the email will go through to my inbox. As soon as they're verified, I get their email. And if I get an email to one of my labels that is unrelated to what I expect in there, for example, if I have a label for my coffee subscription service, and in that section arrives an email supposedly from my bank, I know that's a phishing attempt. And importantly, I know that that email was leaked by my coffee subscription service. They would never do that to me, this is just hypothetical. I love my coffee subscription. Once I know somewhere has leaked my email and now I'm receiving phishing requests, all I have to do is change the label ID and that will change my email address. I'll stop receiving pretend bank emails. Port 87 is such a good way to get rid of spam, to alleviate the stress of phishing attempts. It's annoying having to be on guard in your own email, and Port 87 takes care of that for you, which is so nice. It's also just great to be so much more organized and have your emails nicely filtered. I love that. Port 87 is currently in a public beta, so if you follow the link down below, go to port87.com. You can join the waiting list to receive an invite code and check out Port 87 for yourself. Thank you so much to Port 87 for sponsoring this video, and to you lovely people for listening to the Bible. I say that more often than one would expect for an atheist. So, the biggie. As is so frequently the case with any sort of bizarre literalism that we encounter on this channel, including creationism, young earth theories, a lot of which overlap with flat earth, this originates in Genesis. I feel like I know Genesis better than the whole rest of the Bible just because it comes up so often. I blame answers in Genesis for popularizing the first and oldest and least reliable book of the Bible. The first piece of so-called evidence for biblical flat earth comes literally from Genesis chapter 1. As a reminder for you folks at home, I'm using an English Standard Version. This specific translation has a fascinating difference, which we'll talk about in a second, okay? Genesis 1:6. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven." Now, in the King James Version, amongst others, rather than expanse is the word firmament, which those in the flat earth community will probably be more familiar with. The firmament, meaning essentially expanse or sky, is in this instance what separates the waters of the heavens above. It also, if you're dead set on being a literalist, has windows, which is where rain comes from. So if you believe in the firmament for this reason, you also have to believe in the windows. The waters of heaven are up there, or clouds, which is an interpretation I quite like because clouds are real, separated from us mugs down here. So here's where a biblical literalist starts to have problems. The Hebrew word Rakia, I did Google the pronunciation, so if that's wrong, I'm sorry. Rakia does indicate a solid structure, and ancient Israelites didn't have telescopes or satellites. They had their eyeballs. And when they looked up, they saw the blue of heaven, waters, miraculously held up in the sky. I want to share a quote with you from an article which I will link down below on this topic. I think it's really nice. "Genesis and modern science are neither enemies nor friends, but two different ways of describing the world according to the means available to people living at those different times." I know skeptics who say things like, "It's in the Bible, don't care then. It's in the Bible, it's fake then." As well as biblical literalists who would say things like, "If John the Baptist stubbed his toe in the Bible, that is historical fact and it is God's will that we know that." People have their reasons for believing both. I find them each an equally ignorant approach to the Bible. So why does the Bible say Rakia? Why does it say there is a solid firmament? Well, the most reasonable explanation is because that's what people thought at the time. That was the common cosmology of the ancient world. There is no reason to believe that Genesis introduced this as a concept. In fact, there are ancient Greek and Sumerian religions, amongst others, which share a similar concept. It was pretty common to believe in watery realms outside of the Earth. Space being an ocean is a popular concept, which I personally prefer to refer to as splosion. So option A for the firmament, it was a popular idea at the time. Option B refers to a phenomenological view. That is a fun word to say, phenomenological. A phenomenological view of the text, basically the identification of a difference between what authors believed and what they wrote. An example provided by the aforementioned article is the modern phrase, "the sun rises." We say this in modern language all the frickin' time. "Hey John, what time's the sun rise tomorrow?" Even though John and I both know the sun doesn't rise, we have no hesitation in saying that, and nor would we have hesitation in writing that in a book. It would be a particularly ignorant and closed off to context view of our time if in 1,000 years a historian read that and said, they thought the sun rose in the sky in the 2000s. That would be wrong. It's a pretty fascinating argument, and I think worth holding in your heads whenever you read a translated work. However, without a TARDIS, or any kind of verifiable source that indicates a different interpretation than literal, we'll never know if there was a meaning different than what is written in the text. So that theory doesn't get us very far. It's interesting to think about, but it's not something we can really apply. So option A is still our best option. Let's talk for a second about the implications of a literal interpretation of Genesis as a whole. I've discussed this a few times, so bear with me if you've heard it before. I love you. Thank you. I will be brief. Here's another great quote for you. Again, I will drop all of these links in the description. The biblical understanding of creation is not being pitted against evolutionary theories, as it is supposed. Rather, evolutionary theories are being juxtaposed with literalist theories of biblical interpretation. That is not even like comparing apples and oranges. It is more like trying to compare oranges and orangutans. There's another great article I found by Grace Communion International, How to Read Genesis, for example, through ancient eyes rather than modern ones. It wasn't written for us in the year 2023. And also in the context of Genesis as a whole, which is far more about Israel than about the creation story, which makes up a tiny, tiny part of it. It's also about asking the right questions, chiefly, what questions was it written to answer at the time? Because it wasn't written for us. Now, the simplest refutation of a literal interpretation of Genesis, it's amazing that answers in Genesis not just survives, but thrives in the modern day. Firstly, the accounts of creation in Genesis 1 and 2 are different. They cannot both be literally, historically, scientifically accurate, rather they are written with different tone and purpose. Secondly, the timeline, which again is different in Genesis 1 and 2. According to a literal reading, it took less than 4 days for the Earth to go from barren wasteland to teeming with life. Much like with the evidence for a globe-shaped Earth, the lines of evidence against a recent creation are multiple across many scientific disciplines. It is not a matter of disproving one piece of evidence. They are multitudinous. I think that's a real word. It's the first time I've ever said it. The Great Flood. There is no credible evidence anywhere for a recent global flood, and more evidence to the contrary. If the flood narrative is representative of a real event, it's more than likely hyperbole. It's like your toilet flooding. Bloody hell, John, half the world's flooded. You gotta help me. In Genesis, the moon is referred to as a light, when we know in the modern day that the moon only reflects the light of the sun. Although, given the flat earth community believes most of what we now know about the moon to be false, maybe we shouldn't spend much time here. Likewise, evolution is a slap in the face to Genesis literalism. That crosses over with our timeline issues. Not only was there not enough time for evolution to take place, but human beings were created in Genesis rather than sharing ancestors with apes. Likewise, birds were created before land-dwelling creatures, which is a problem if you believe that birds evolved from dinosaurs. Alright, that's Genesis, that's the firmament. The most likely reason that Genesis indicates there's a dome over the earth holding back the waters of heaven is because that's what a lot of the ancient world thought already at the time. That's how the ancient Israelites would have described what they saw with their eyes. Why God would choose to relay information to the ancient people in that way is something that you personally and theologians should consider in your own time. If you want my opinion, it would be a pretty simple case of speak to the people in a way they understand. It's poetic, it lines up with their current beliefs. I wouldn't find the brief mention of the firmament in Genesis particularly challenging to Christianity or your faith. I wouldn't worry about it. That's just my personal view. Our next troublesome phrasing from the Bible then, the four corners of the earth. The Bible talks about the four corners of the earth in a few places. For example, in Isaiah. Oh, I nearly landed perfectly on it. Isaiah 11:12. He will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Why does the Bible say the corners of the earth so many times? Because it's a popular idiom. This isn't any different from our example earlier of the sun rises. Shakespeare, across several plays, uses the phrases all corners of the earth, three corners of the earth, and four corners of the earth. Three corners of the world? All corners of the world? Three corners of the world, four corners of the earth? Did Shakespeare think the earth was flat? No. It's poetry. It's poetic. It's an idiom. It's a metaphor. A good example, Russell, a good example of this is poetic usage in the Bible comes from Job. Job 37:2. Keep listening to the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that comes from his mouth. Under the whole heaven he lets it go, and his lightning to the corners of the earth. Is this part of Job saying that the Lord's voice is literally thunder? If so, it was probably really hard for Moses and everyone to understand what he was saying. Sorry, Lord? Could you repeat that? The whole description is poetic. Just as the Lord's voice is as thunder, the four corners of the earth refer to the farthest extremities. I think that is obvious to most people. Corners in the original text is translated from the Hebrew word kanaf. Again, I'm going to say some like Greek and super old Italian names and stuff later as well, so let's just put a blanket apology right now for my pronunciations. Sorry, thank you for your understanding. You can correct me in the comments. Don't email me about it. Thank you. Kanaf is translated a few different ways in the Bible, but generally it means extremities. Here's the real kicker for this whole four corners shtick. A literal approach to this idea would indicate that the Earth is a quadrilateral. Of course, virtually every flat Earth model I've ever seen depicts the Earth as a disc. No corners on a little squishy circle disc. None! The Bible itself refers to the earth as round back in Isaiah, I don't remember which chapter, but it says it is he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth. And just to bring it full circle, with the firmament conversation we had earlier, if you were imagining God sitting above the earth and looking down, what shape would you see? Fucking squashy circle in it. So mentions of the corners of the earth in the Bible, not functional evidence for a scriptural flat earth. In fact, the Bible gives scriptural evidence to the contrary of the four corners. It is simply a popular phrasing that means the peoples from the furthest extremities of the earth. All over the earth. That's what that means. To Matthew then, and an oft-cited piece of flat earth evidence, I find this one very bizarre, but I see it everywhere I look up biblical evidence for flat earth, the devil's temptation of Jesus. Matthew 4:8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Yes, that is used as evidence for a biblical flat earth. Now, there are several problems with this. Firstly, as the flat earther who we talked about previously mentioned numerous times in his video about me, Satan is the father of all lies.
He's the father of lies.
If you believe that Satan is the great deceiver, using him as evidence is probably not the best idea. Secondly, there is no mountain in which all the world is visible. If there was, the flat earth debate would have been long since settled. We'd have got up there and seen it. Even if Jesus went up a mountain and saw a great distance, there's no way he'd be able to see the kingdoms in all of their glory. He wouldn't be able to see the details of their glory from a mountain. Thirdly, there is another account of this temptation, of this event in Luke. Also chapter 4? Or am I making that up? Luke 4:5, and the devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. In a moment of time. This is also not literally possible. That lends credence to the idea that this is some kind of vision. It is not literally the devil and Jesus going on a hiking trip together up a big mountain where you can see the entire world. When you put it like that, seems kind of obvious. Our next piece of biblical evidence is the notion throughout the Bible that God made the earth immovable and fixed. This comes up a few times in Psalms and in other places. Once again, let's think about perspective. As our understanding of the wider universe develops, it's getting ever so slightly easier to conceptualize the idea of Earth as a planetary body subject to change. However, the everyday human experience is too removed from that to ever notice. As far as you and I, and especially ancient peoples who didn't have our modern science, are concerned, the Earth has always been here. We have never woken up and fallen out of bed because everything has moved 2 inches to the side without us. Because while the Earth moves, we move with it. Our perspective is one of a fixed position. There are also so very many ways of interpreting this concept non-literally. It makes more sense to consider this not in terms of God made this and it's staying put, but more like this is about the permanence of God and his creation. Finally, and I wasn't going to include this initially because it disproves itself, but because I have seen it cited in at least one conversation about the biblical flat earth, better to leave no stone unturned, eh? Let us turn to Daniel chapter 4. 429. Perfectly on the page. If that ain't divine intervention, God is on my side, guys. In Daniel 4, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream about a great tree that is visible across the whole earth. Its top is touching heaven, it has bountiful, delicious, perfect fruit. A holy one comes down and says, hack that tree down, but leave the stump, let it slum it with the worms and shit. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is the gist. Daniel hesitantly translates the dream and reveals that the tree in the dream represents the king, and the chopping down represents King Nebuchadnezzar being reduced to live as the animals until he humbles himself and realizes that God is the top dog and is really jealous about it. Spoiler alert, that is what happens. Now, there's not much to say about this really, because it's a dream. There doesn't need to be a functional reality in which a tree could be seen from the whole earth, because the tree is just a metaphor for the king who grew so high and mighty and was cut down to learn his place. Even if you have a literalist approach to the Bible, you would believe that this is a conversation between King Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. Daniel actually has a different name here, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I've just closed the Bible, so I'm not going to look again, sorry. You'd believe that it's a conversation they had about a dream. There's no need to imagine a world in which the dream could be literally true, because it is always a dream. We understand that the tree isn't real, so why would the flat earth required to house it need to exist? Have you ever had a dream where your house is your house, but it isn't really your house, and like there's too many rooms and they don't connect properly, it's got MC Escher stairs? It's like that. It's a metaphor. It's a sign in a dream. I don't need to talk about this one any further, right? The best scriptural evidence you have for any of the flat earth related theories is the firmament. Not only is that contradictory to so many avenues of science exploration, etc., it is problematic as a whole in so many ways to take the entirety of Genesis as literal historical fact without context. Moving on to part 2. The myth of the medieval church and flat earth. So, the anti-science church of the medieval day denying the earth is a globe. Scandalous! And false. In fact, the notion that medieval people in general didn't believe the earth was a globe is also false. If you're interested, you might want to read Edward Grant's book, God and Reason in the Middle Ages. This is a largely anti-Catholic myth that cropped up around the 19th century. It's become so popular, despite its limited origins, that people still believe it today. One of the key sources of this myth, one of the key origins of this myth, was from Washington Irving. Irving was a popular novelist who wrote a smash hit about Columbus. This novel featured a scene in which Columbus is trying to convince a council of wise men to sail west. The council is skeptical because of their biblical views, and many of them are flat earth believers. So what is the problem? The book is fiction. It's a fictionalized novel based on a real man, and it was popular enough to cement this notion of wise Christian leaders as flat earth believers, influencing not just the public, but other writers. To quote a 1992 New York Times article, which I will also leave for you down below because it's quite well written, none of the documents from Columbus's day or the early accounts of his labours suggest there was any debate about the roundness of the earth. Much like the movie Bohemian Rhapsody rewrote the timeline of Freddie Mercury's life for dramatic effect, leading people to believe messed up stuff like John Reid tried to solo Freddie and got kicked out as their manager, or that Freddie turned his back on Queen to go solo. Yeah, I am still annoyed about those things. So too did Irving's novel, even inadvertently, change the public's view of Christian leaders as generally anti-science. Another culprit is William Whewell? Whewell? Question mark. A generally brilliant English scientist, philosopher, and Christian, and the origin of the word scientist. That's pretty neat! He too painted the earlier age, the Dark Age, as a time of dogmatic stupidity, naivety, and anti-science, and highlighted a couple of Christian authors, such as Lactantius, citation needed on the pronunciation, who denied the Greek notions of a spherical earth. Lactantius believed that the Antipodes nuts, that is, the other side of the earth, couldn't exist because everything would be upside down. Yeah, that was a pretty stupid idea. They didn't understand gravity at the time. However, presenting his thoughts as representative of mainstream medieval belief and amongst church leaders is flat out misleading. The truth is that prominent thinkers with this belief that the earth was flat were very rare. The first unambiguous references we have to a spherical earth come from ancient Greek philosophers, such as Plato and Aristotle. Medieval maps, textbooks, depictions of the earth in art show us that the roundness of the earth was common knowledge. In fact, by the time the Roman Emperor Pliny the Elder, I just don't know. Knowing my luck, it's probably pronounced like Flaunay or something. By the time he was writing his book Natural History around AD 77, the fact that the Earth is a sphere was being treated as common knowledge. He wrote, "We all agree on the Earth's shape, for surely we always speak of the round ball of the Earth." I'll show you on screen a page from the Tiberius Psalter, which shows a fabulous illustration of God creating the earth with a compass and scales. God was frequently depicted with a compass, because how else do you draw something round? In Dante's Divine Comedy, he expresses how the shape of the world created different time zones. Finally, Galileo. The last myth on our list for today is that Galileo Galilei, physicist, astronomer, heralded as the father of the scientific method, came into opposition with the Catholic Church for holding that the Earth was round. Clearly this is not true, or it wouldn't be in this video. Galileo was a champion of, and here I'm going to use one of the Flat Earth community's favourite phrases because they say it so often, the heliocentric model. At the time, most people subscribed to the Aristotelian view of geocentrism, the idea that the Earth is the centre of the universe. One can understand why it was, and still is for some Christians, a challenge to accept that we, the Lord's primary creation, are not the centre of everything, and the reason for everything, but just one of 9... I genuinely can't remember if Pluto is a planet right now or not. Planets in one star system of countless others. The unfathomably vast and seemingly largely barren expanse of space was certainly a roadblock between myself and Christianity, so naturally it caused the Catholic Church some headaches. Provoked by the Church's backlash, Galileo himself wrote a letter to Benedetto Castelli, arguing that the concept of a heliocentric model was not contrary to biblical texts, and that the Bible was an authority on morality and spirituality, not on science. I'm quite happy to be on the side of Galileo in this discussion. Galileo's writings were submitted to the Inquisition, who believed that he was challenging the Bible and sounding suspiciously like a Protestant right now, because remember, that's what it was really all about. A commission by the Inquisition found that heliocentrism was silly and not properly biblical, and they ordered Galileo to abandon his works. The story goes on with him eventually living out his days under house arrest. We could easily do a whole video on Galileo's troubles with the Church, so I'll just wrap this up with the fact that there were a multitude of reasons outside of their biblical and scientific views for the Pope and the Church to go so hard on Galileo. It's fascinating, and as with most human affairs, not simply related to factual and textual arguments, but also emotional and political context. The Church formally dropped their prohibition of books relating to the heliocentric model in 1758. As more scientific evidence for the heliocentric model arose, the Catholic Church was forced to quietly accept that actually we might not be the centre of the universe. Although it wasn't until 1979 that Pope John Paul II ordered an investigation into the Church's treatment of Galileo. TLDR, Galileo got some shit from the Catholic Church over his studies into the heliocentric model of the universe. The question of the shape of the Earth, or the possibility of its flatness, did not enter into the discussion at all, because it was accepted by the public and the Church that the Earth was a roundy boy. This all brings us back to this notion of bias. Those authors who spread this myth of a church and a naive and dogmatic medieval people who believed stubbornly in a flat Earth stems from personal bias against the Church. To use anti-Christian bias as a basis for religious belief is, albeit unintentionally, pretty ignorant. Likewise, while we are shining a light on those biblical flat earthers, it's largely skeptics and anti-theists responsible for spreading the misinformation that leads to those beliefs. I don't want to be a douchebag moral authority giving you life lessons from on high, so I'm just going to say there's something for all of us here to consider about our own beliefs and our approach to research. So there you go. Does the Bible say the Earth is flat? I say no. Has the wider Church ever denied that the Earth is a globe? History says no. Please do leave your thoughts and interpretations in the comments. Did you learn anything new? Do you have anything interesting to add? Please let me know. This is such an interesting conversation. Like I keep saying, I find any literalist approach to the Bible to be so strange. It's just so, like I said, it's so clinical. It's so weird to take a collection of books that has so much poetry and metaphor and say, no, that's a historical fact. If it's in the Bible, it happened exactly as it said, even if that means at one point Jesus and the devil went up an ancient giant mountain from which you could see the entire world. Despite all of the many reasons that's impossible. I find that sort of mind-boggling, so I think it's kind of interesting to talk about. Do give this video a cheeky like if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing so you don't miss future videos. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. I had a bath the other night where I remembered some stuff that I wanted to talk about, and I had like 5 ideas for videos, so I'm really excited for a bunch of upcoming stuff right now. You should subscribe, please. Also, it makes me happy. I love you. Thank you. If you'd like to see more from little old me, consider checking out Emma Thorne Backstage for more vloggy, casual, personal, chill kind of content. We just vibe over there, we just vibing. If you like video games, you can check out Little Duck Gaming on YouTube. You can follow me at Emma Little Duck on Twitch so you can say hi live and we can have a chat and you can watch me be bad at video games. If you do enjoy what I do and you would like to support this channel, the best way to do so is via my Patreon. You can also become a channel member right here. You get comment priority, which means that when I go to my comments, I click on channel members and look at your comments first, so I don't ever miss any from channel members, and you get some very silly emotes. With that, I must give a big old thank you and a shout out to my giant chickens and colossal quackers over on Patreon. Have yourselves a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon.